I'm Samantha Reynolds, 32, and I never thought a single text message could shatter my world. It's over between us. Don't contact us again. The words from my mother burned on my phone screen, leaving me breathless. Just yesterday, I'd learned my parents changed their will to leave everything to my brother Ryan. 48 hours earlier, we'd shared a warm family dinner where everything seemed normal. Mom laughed at my jokes. Dad asked about my promotion. Now, staring at 7 devastating words, I'm determined to understand what happened and fix whatever invisible line I've crossed. Before I dive into how my perfect family fell apart overnight, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments, hit that like button if you've ever received a text that turned your world upside down, and subscribe to join our community of people navigating complicated family relationships. Now, let me take you back to where this nightmare began. Growing up as Samantha Reynolds meant one thing: I was the responsible one. While most kids were enjoying carefree summer days at the community pool, I was the 10-year-old taking advanced math classes and practicing violin for 3 hours daily. It wasn't that my parents explicitly pushed me, they didn't have to. I somehow intuited early on that their approval came packaged with achievement. Look at Sam's report card, my dad would beam to relatives at family gatherings. Straight A's again, she gets that from my side of the family. My mother would smile proudly, smoothing my always neat hair, and she organized her own study schedule. Never have to remind this one to do her homework. Meanwhile, my brother Ryan, 3 years older, operated under completely different rules. Where I was studious and careful, Ryan was charismatic and free-spirited. He could charm our stern math teacher into accepting late homework with the same winning smile he used to convince our parents that failing sophomore chemistry was actually a learning experience about the scientific method. I vividly remember staying up until 2 a.m. helping him finish a science fair project he'd procrastinated on, only to watch him receive more praise than I did for my meticulously researched presentation that won first place. Ryan really pulled it together at the last minute, Mom would say admiringly. He works so well under pressure. By high school, our roles were firmly established. I was valedictorian, captain of the debate team, and first chair violin, the daughter who made parenting look easy. Ryan was the son who made life interesting with his dramatic stories, passionate but short-lived interests, and ability to talk his way out of any consequence. When I earned a full scholarship to Northwestern, my parents were proud but unsurprised. Of course, Sam got a scholarship, they'd tell friends. She's always been so responsible. The subtle implication hung in the air. Being responsible was my nature, not an achievement worthy of special recognition. After college, I followed a logical path into financial advising, quickly establishing myself at a respected firm in downtown Chicago. By 30, I owned a modest but stylish condo overlooking Lincoln Park, had a healthy retirement account, and had been featured in Chicago Business Monthly as a financial advisor to watch. On paper, I was the picture of success. Ryan's path took more creative turns. First came his organic smoothie food truck, which failed after 6 months because he wasn't passionate about blending anymore. Then the artisanal beard oil company that lost its initial investment when Ryan decided the market was too saturated with facial hair products. Most recently, a cryptocurrency consulting business that mysteriously dissolved after clients began asking for actual results. Each venture followed the same pattern: enthusiasm, parental investment, failure, parental bailout. I witnessed the cycle repeatedly, offering supportive words while privately wondering when my parents would stop enabling him. Yet despite the evidence, I never stopped believing in Ryan either. His ideas were genuinely creative, his passion infectious. When he called me excitedly about each new venture, I couldn't help but hope this would be the one where his potential finally materialized. "You're my biggest supporter, Sam," he told me once after I helped him prepare a business pitch. Besides Mom and Dad, of course. That's how it had always been: Ryan at the center, the 3 of us orbiting around him, providing the gravitational support he needed to keep from spinning into chaos. As our parents approached retirement, the topic of inheritance arose occasionally in family conversations. I never paid much attention, uncomfortable with discussing money my parents were still very much alive to use. I assumed their estate would be divided equally between Ryan and me, the default arrangement for most families I knew. That assumption shattered during a weekend visit just 3 days ago. I'd driven from Chicago to my parents' suburban home, excited to share news about a promotion at work. We enjoyed a typical family dinner, Dad grilling steaks, Mom making her famous roasted potatoes, pleasant conversation about neighborhood gossip and distant relatives. As Mom served her blueberry cobbler, Dad casually mentioned they'd finalized their estate planning. "We've decided to leave the house and most of our assets to Ryan," he said between bites, as if commenting on the weather. "We've been thinking about it, and it just makes the most sense." I froze, fork midway to my mouth. "What?" "It's nothing personal, sweetie," my mother added quickly. "You're just so established and secure. Ryan needs more of a safety net." I nodded numbly, forcing the bite of dessert past the sudden lump in my throat. The cobbler, usually my favorite, tasted like sawdust. That was the first betrayal, not just the decision itself, but the casual way it was delivered, as if they expected me to agree that my lifetime of responsible choices should be penalized while Ryan's pattern of failure was rewarded. The weekend visit had started so promisingly. Friday evening, I left work early, changed into comfortable clothes, and made the 90-minute drive to Oakwood Estates, the suburban community where my parents had lived since I was born. The familiar streets lined with mature oaks brought back memories of bike rides and block parties, a childhood that felt secure and predictable. My parents' two-story colonial looked exactly as it always had. Mom's carefully tended flower beds flanking the walkway, Dad's perfectly edged lawn a testament to his weekend dedication. I breathed in the scent of grilling meat as I approached the front door, my stomach already anticipating dinner. "There she is," Dad called from the kitchen as I let myself in. At 68, William Reynolds still maintained the robust physique of the high school football coach he'd been for 30 years. His silver hair was freshly trimmed, his khakis pressed even for a casual family dinner. Mom emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on the apron I'd given her last Christmas. At 65, Margaret Reynolds remained elegantly put together, her silver-streaked brown hair styled in the same bob she'd worn for decades. "We were just wondering when you'd arrive," she said, embracing me. "Traffic bad?" "Not terrible," I replied, following them into the kitchen where preparations for dinner were underway. "I brought that Pinot Noir you liked last time." I placed the wine bottle on the counter, alongside a sleek folder containing the documents for my promotion. I was eager to share my news but waiting for the right moment. Ryan arrived 30 minutes later, bursting through the door with his typical energy. "Family dinner," he announced, as if he'd invented the concept. At 35, my brother had the same dark hair and blue eyes as me, but where I was reserved, he was expressive, his face animated as he hugged our parents and dramatically presented a store-bought cheesecake. "You didn't have to bring dessert," Mom said, even as she placed it prominently in the refrigerator. "I made cobbler." "Now we have options," Ryan replied with a wink. Dinner progressed as it always did, Dad carving the steaks with surgical precision, Mom ensuring everyone had second helpings, Ryan dominating conversation with entertaining stories about people I'd never meet from his latest social circle. I waited until there was a natural lull to mention my promotion. "So, I have some news," I said, trying to match Ryan's confident delivery. "Henderson and Associates selected me to lead their new retirement planning division. It comes with a significant raise and my own team." "That's wonderful, honey," Mom said, patting my hand. "You've always been so good with numbers." Dad nodded approvingly. "Does this mean you'll finally take a vacation?" "You work too hard, Sam." Ryan raised his wine glass. To Sam, the family overachiever. It was a perfectly pleasant acknowledgement, yet somehow deflating. My significant professional achievement, one that had required months of preparation and years of consistent performance, was noted and dismissed in less than a minute. The conversation quickly returned to Ryan's amusing anecdote about a celebrity he'd supposedly encountered at a downtown coffee shop. As Mom served her blueberry cobbler alongside Ryan's cheesecake, with equal prominence on the table, I noticed, Dad cleared his throat. "Since we're sharing news," he began, "your mother and I finalized our estate planning this week. Been meaning to get it done for a while." "Smart move," I said, mentally switching to financial advisor mode. "It's always better to have those documents in order early." "Well, we wanted to let you both know how we've decided to structure things," he continued. "We're leaving the house and most of our investments to Ryan. Sam, you'll receive your grandmother's jewelry and the vacation property in Michigan." The disparity was staggering. The house alone was worth over $500,000 in the current market. Their retirement accounts and other investments likely totaled another $800,000. The lakeside cottage in Michigan, while sentimentally valuable, needed significant repairs and was worth perhaps $150,000. I don't understand, I stammered, setting down my fork. Mom reached across the table, her expression gentle but firm. It's not complicated, dear. Ryan needs more security than you do. You're so capable and successful already. You've got that fancy condo and retirement fund, Dad added. Ryan hasn't had the same opportunities to build that foundation. I looked at Ryan, expecting to see embarrassment or perhaps apologetic discomfort. Instead, he was studying his cheesecake with exaggerated interest, avoiding eye contact entirely. But I struggled to find words that wouldn't sound petulant. Aren't opportunities something you create for yourself? Not everyone has your natural discipline, Samantha, Mom replied, her tone taking on a familiar sharpness. Some people need more support. That doesn't make them less deserving. I never said Ryan wasn't deserving, I protested. I just don't understand why this needs to be so uneven. Dad sighed heavily. This is exactly why we didn't want to make a big announcement. We knew you'd turn it into a competition. A competition? The accusations stung. You're literally creating a numerical disparity in how you value us, and I'm the one making it a competition? See? This is why we can't discuss money rationally, Mom interjected. You're getting emotional when this is a practical decision. You're financially secure. Ryan isn't. It's that simple. The rest of dessert passed in uncomfortable silence. I declined coffee, suddenly eager to escape the suffocating tension. The drive home was a blur of tears and confusion. Had I been too demanding? Was I being selfish for expecting equal treatment? Or was I finally seeing clearly that the family dynamics I'd accepted my entire life were fundamentally unfair? The next morning, Ryan called. I braced myself for an apology, or at least an acknowledgement of the awkward situation. Instead, he launched into what sounded like a rehearsed speech. Listen, Sam, I wanted to explain about the will situation, he began. It was actually my suggestion to Mom and Dad. I've been helping them organize their retirement, and it just makes financial sense to simplify the estate this way. That was the second betrayal, learning that the brother I'd supported unconditionally had actively advocated for my disinheritance. Not only had my parents decided I deserved less, but my own brother had persuaded them of it. After a restless night replaying the dinner conversation and Ryan's morning revelation, I decided to address the situation directly. No passive-aggressive texts or silent treatment. I would call my parents and have a mature discussion about their decision. After all, I was a professional who regularly navigated difficult financial conversations with clients. Surely I could handle one with my own family. I waited until Sunday afternoon, knowing they'd be home after church. With my points mentally organized, I dialed their number, hands slightly trembling despite my resolution to remain calm. Sam, honey, Mom answered cheerfully. Did you forget something at the house? No, Mom. I wanted to talk about yesterday's conversation regarding your will, I said, keeping my voice steady. I've had some time to think, and I'd like to understand your reasoning better. There was a pause, then the muffled sound of her calling my father to pick up the extension. William, Sam wants to talk about the estate planning. When Dad joined the call, his voice carried that familiar slight impatience. I thought we covered this yesterday, Sam. We touched on it, I replied carefully, but I think the conversation deserves more than a brief mention over dessert. This is a significant decision that affects both Ryan and me. We've made our decision, Samantha, Mom stated firmly. We don't need to justify it. I took a deep breath. I'm not asking for justification. I'm trying to understand. My entire life, I've worked hard to be responsible and self-sufficient because that's what you taught me to value. Now it seems I'm being penalized for achieving exactly what you encouraged me to achieve. Nobody's being penalized, Dad countered. We're making decisions based on need, not merit. This isn't about who deserves what. But isn't that exactly what inheritance is traditionally about? I pressed. Passing down the fruits of your life's work to the children who will continue your legacy? Are you suggesting Ryan isn't worthy of our legacy? Mom's voice took on the dangerous quietness I recognized from childhood disagreements. That's exactly the elitist attitude we're concerned about, Samantha. I never said that, I protested. I love Ryan. I've supported him through every failed business venture, every financial crisis. I've never judged him for his choices. Clearly you have, Dad interjected. Listen to yourself, failed ventures. You've always thought you were better than your brother. The conversation was spiraling in exactly the direction I'd wanted to avoid. That's not true. I just believe in equal treatment. I don't understand why supporting Ryan has to come at my expense. At your expense? Mom's voice rose. You act like we've never supported you. Who paid for your violin lessons? Your debate team trips? Your SAT prep courses? I'm grateful for everything you've done for me, I said, feeling increasingly frustrated. But you supported Ryan's education too, plus all his business attempts, his apartment rent when he couldn't pay, his car payments. So now you're keeping score? Dad interrupted. This is exactly what we were afraid of. You've become so focused on money and status that you can't see what really matters. What matters is that you're treating us differently, I insisted, my carefully prepared points dissolving in the face of their united front. And you always have. Ryan gets endless chances while I get impossible standards. You're questioning our judgment as parents now? Dad's voice took on the authoritative tone he'd used with unruly students. After everything we've done for you? The conversation deteriorated further as emotions escalated. I found myself saying things I immediately regretted. Maybe if I'd been a constant disappointment instead of supporting myself, I'd be getting the house too. The words burst out before I could stop them. There was a shocked silence. Then Mom spoke, her voice ice cold. I think this conversation is over, Samantha. When you're ready to apologize for that remark, you can call us back. Mom, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. The line went dead. Seconds later, my phone buzzed with a text from Dad. Very disappointed in your attitude. We raised you better than this. I sat at my kitchen counter, staring at the phone, adrenaline and regret, washing through me in alternating waves. The conversation had gone catastrophically wrong, but beneath my remorse was a stubborn feeling that I hadn't been heard, that legitimate concerns about fairness had been dismissed as jealousy and entitlement. That evening, while sorting through some financial documents to distract myself, I came across photos from my parents' anniversary trip to their Michigan vacation property last summer. Something about the date caught my attention. I pulled out my laptop and checked county property records, available through my work database. What I found was the third betrayal. My parents had quietly transferred ownership of the vacation property to Ryan 3 months ago. The cottage they'd promised me in their will was already his. They hadn't just planned to disinherit me, they'd already begun the process and lied about it over dinner. I stared at the official record, the transfer date stamped in impersonal digital clarity. All those weekends I'd spent helping them repair the dock, plant gardens, and repaint the weathered siding, working on a property that had secretly been given to my brother, who had never shown any interest in maintaining it. The discovery left me numb. What else had they misrepresented? What other decisions had been made behind my back? The parents I thought I knew fair, honest, straightforward were becoming strangers before my eyes. Monday morning arrived with the harsh buzz of my alarm, pulling me from a fitful sleep haunted by fragmented dreams of childhood homes with locked doors I couldn't enter. I reached for my phone with the automatic motion of modern habit, squinting against the screen's blue glare. Notifications crowded the display, work emails, news alerts, social media updates, but one stood out starkly against the others. A text from Mom, sent at 5:47 a.m. It's over between us. Don't contact us again. 7 words, 26 letters that demolished 32 years of relationship. I read it again, certain I'd misunderstood. Perhaps it was meant for someone else, sent to me by mistake, but no, it followed our argument logically, if extremely. I sat up in bed, suddenly wide awake, my heart hammering against my ribs. Immediately, I tried calling. The call went straight to voicemail. I tried Dad's number with the same result. I sent texts to both. Please talk to me. I'm sorry about yesterday. Can we please discuss this? No response. I showered and dressed mechanically, my mind racing through possible scenarios. They were angry but would calm down. They wanted to teach me a lesson. They were being manipulated by Ryan. This was a misunderstanding that would resolve itself once emotions cooled. But as morning stretched into afternoon with no response to my increasingly desperate messages, the reality began to sink in. My parents had cut me off completely over a single heated conversation. I tried calling Ryan, hoping he might provide insight or mediation. He answered on the fourth ring, his voice guarded. "Now isn't a good time, Sam. Ryan, please. Mom sent me a text ending our relationship. I need to understand what's happening." He sighed heavily. "You really crossed a line yesterday. Calling me a disappointment?" "I didn't call you a disappointment," I interrupted. "I was making a point about different standards." "Please, can you help me fix this?" "This is between you and them," he replied, his tone maddeningly calm. "I'm not getting involved." "But you are involved," I protested. "This all started with the will which you suggested they change." "I'm not discussing this, Sam. I have to go." The call ended, leaving me with more questions than answers. By mid-afternoon, I was struggling to focus on work, staring blankly at spreadsheets that normally held my complete attention. The physical symptoms of emotional shock began manifesting: a persistent knot in my stomach, a pressure in my chest that made each breath feel insufficient, hands that trembled slightly when I reached for my water bottle. During a client meeting, the combination of stress, sleeplessness, and emotional turmoil culminated in my first ever panic attack. In the middle of explaining a retirement projection, my vision suddenly tunneled, my heart raced uncontrollably, and I became convinced I was having a heart attack. My colleague Jen recognized what was happening and smoothly took over the presentation while guiding me to a private office. "Deep breath, Sam," she instructed, her voice seeming to come from far away. "This will pass. It's anxiety, not a heart attack." After the symptoms subsided, leaving me exhausted and embarrassed, Jen insisted on driving me home. "Whatever's going on, you need rest," she said firmly. "The clients will understand." At her urging, I requested emergency personal leave, something I'd never done in my career. My supervisor approved it immediately, having witnessed my uncharacteristic breakdown. Back in my condo, I drew the blinds and retreated to bed, my phone clutched in my hand like a lifeline. Still no response from my parents. The text glared at me whenever I checked. "It's over between us. Don't contact us again." How could 3 decades of family bonds be severed with a single text message? What kind of parents disowned their child over one argument? The questions circled endlessly, finding no resolution. As days passed, my apartment became my isolation zone. I ignored calls from friends, canceled plans, and lived on delivery food that I barely tasted. The only activity that provided any distraction was compulsively reviewing family photos, searching for clues I might have missed, signs that our relationship had always been conditional, that my place in the family had always been tenuous. There were hundreds of photos, birthday celebrations, graduations, holiday gatherings. In nearly every image, Ryan stood at the center, my parents flanking him proudly while I stood slightly apart, smiling the perfect smile I'd perfected early. Had I always been on the periphery without realizing it? On Thursday, my phone rang with a call from my Aunt Patrice, my mother's sister. Desperate for family connection, I answered immediately. "Samantha, what on earth did you do?" she demanded without preamble. "Your mother is absolutely devastated." "Aunt Patrice, I don't understand what's happening," I began. "We had an argument about the will, and now Mom says our relationship is over." "Well, you must have said something truly terrible," she replied, her tone accusatory. "Margaret says she's never been so hurt in her life. And attacking poor Ryan that way?" "Attacking Ryan? I didn't attack anyone. We were discussing their decision to leave everything to him. That's their decision to make, isn't it? You've always been the successful one. Maybe it's time you showed some gratitude instead of entitlement." The conversation continued in this vein, with Aunt Patrice clearly having heard a version of events that bore little resemblance to reality. When I tried to explain my perspective, she cut me off impatiently. "Listen to yourself, Samantha. Always so logical, so correct. Sometimes family isn't about being right, it's about being supportive." After she hung up, calls and texts began arriving from other relatives, cousins, my father's brother, even my grandmother, all expressing disappointment in my selfish behavior and attack on Ryan. The narrative had spread through the family grapevine, transforming as it traveled until I hardly recognized the story being told about me. This was the 4th betrayal, discovering that my family had not only excluded me from their plans but were now actively rewriting history to justify their treatment of me. painting me as the villain in a story where I'd been blindsided and hurt. By Friday night, a full 5 days after the initial dinner revelation, I found myself sitting on my kitchen floor surrounded by photo albums, a half-empty bottle of wine beside me. I'd reached the bargaining stage of grief, mentally composing elaborate apologies for offenses I wasn't sure I'd committed, planning grand gestures of reconciliation that felt hollow even as I imagined them. In a moment of desperation, I drove to my childhood neighborhood after midnight, parking across from my parents' house like some kind of stalker. The lights were off, the house peaceful. I sat there for an hour, unable to approach but unwilling to leave, tears streaming down my face as I confronted the possibility that I had truly lost my family forever. A week after receiving my mother's devastating text, I barely recognized myself. The polished financial advisor who gave confident presentations and managed millions in client assets had been replaced by a hollow-eyed stranger who hadn't showered in 3 days. My condo, normally immaculate, was littered with takeout containers and discarded tissues. I'd stopped checking work emails, responding only with automated out-of-office replies that were becoming increasingly concerning to my colleagues. Sleep came in irregular bursts, frequently interrupted by dreams where I was a child again, locked out of my house in the rain while I could see my family through the windows, laughing together without me. I'd wake gasping, reaching for my phone to check for messages that never came. In the endless hours of sleepless isolation, I replayed every family memory I could conjure, searching for warning signs I'd missed. The Christmas when Ryan received a car while I got a sensible laptop for college. The way my parents attended every one of Ryan's baseball games but made it to only half of my orchestra concerts because you don't need us there to perform well. The family vacations where my preferences for activities were consistently overruled in favor of Ryan's choices. Had I been so eager for approval that I'd normalized patterns of favoritism my entire life? Or was I now retroactively casting innocent family dynamics in a sinister light because of recent events? I tried once more to reach my parents, sending a carefully composed email since my calls and texts went unanswered. I love you both and am deeply sorry for any hurt I've caused. Please give me a chance to make things right. The message bounced back immediately. Their email system had been set to automatically reject messages from my address. The thoroughness of their rejection was breathtaking. They hadn't just stopped responding, they had actively erected barriers to prevent any communication from me reaching them. Ryan remained equally inaccessible, responding to my messages with increasingly brief texts. Not a good time became, can't talk became, please stop contacting me. With Thanksgiving approaching, my favorite holiday since childhood, the prospect of spending it alone while imagining my family gathered without me became unbearable. I finally accepted a concerned call from my friend Megan, who insisted on bringing groceries and checking on me in person. "Oh, Sam," she said when I opened the door, her expression shifting from concern to alarm as she took in my appearance and the state of my apartment. "What happened to you?" Her simple question broke something open inside me, and I found myself sobbing in her arms, incoherently relating the events of the past week. Megan guided me to the couch, listened without judgment, then gently but firmly guided me to the shower while she tackled the worst of the chaos in my living room. Clean, fed with the soup she'd brought, and sitting in a less cluttered space, I felt marginally more human. "I don't understand how this happened," I told her, clutching a mug of tea. "One argument and my entire family disowns me?" "It does seem extreme," Megan agreed cautiously. "Have your parents ever reacted this way before? Cut off contact over a disagreement?" I thought back, trying to recall any precedent. Not with me. They've always been disappointed when I don't meet expectations, but never this. What about with others? Extended family? Friends? A memory surfaced slowly. There was my dad's brother, Uncle James. They had some kind of falling out when I was about 12. I remember asking why he stopped coming to holidays, and my parents said he'd made his choice. I never knew what happened, and we weren't allowed to mention him after that. Megan nodded thoughtfully. "And they expected you to just accept that without explanation? To cut him off because they had?" "I guess so. I never really questioned it." The parallel with my current situation sent a chill through me. Would I become another unmentionable name in family conversations? Would my cousin's children grow up not knowing I existed? The next day, determined to break out of my isolation spiral, I forced myself to leave the apartment. Without conscious planning, I found myself driving toward my parents' neighborhood, drawn by an irresistible need to see the house. As if the physical building might provide answers, the people inside it refused to give. I parked a block away and walked slowly past the colonial where I'd grown up. Fall leaves carpeted the lawn my father usually kept pristine, an uncharacteristic lapse in yard maintenance that caught my attention. The flower beds looked similarly neglected, with dead blooms still attached to stems my mother would normally have pruned weeks ago. As I stood observing these small signs of household disruption, Mrs. Abernathy, my parents' next-door neighbor for 20 years, emerged from her house to collect her mail. She spotted me immediately. "Samantha, thank goodness. I've been worried about your parents." I approached cautiously, uncertain what story might have reached her. "Hi, Mrs. Abernathy. What do you mean, worried?" The elderly woman glanced toward my parents' house before continuing in a lowered voice. "They haven't been themselves lately. Your father skipped the neighborhood association meeting last week, first time in 15 years. And your mother? Well, I saw her getting the mail in her bathrobe at 3 in the afternoon yesterday. That's not like Margaret at all. Have you spoken with them recently?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. "I brought over a pie on Sunday, but your brother said they weren't feeling well and couldn't visit. He seemed quite agitated, rushing me away from the door." She studied my face carefully. "Is everything all right with your family, dear? Your parents have always been such fixtures in the community." "I'm not sure," I admitted. "We've had a disagreement. I'm trying to figure things out." Mrs. Abernathy placed a papery hand on my arm. "Well, I don't want to alarm you, but I've noticed your brother coming and going at odd hours. And there was an unusual number of documents being carried into the house last weekend, looked like financial papers to me. I hope your parents aren't having money troubles." I thanked her for the information and continued my walk, mind racing with new questions. Ryan spending unusual amounts of time at our parents' house? Financial documents? It didn't align with the simple narrative of a family rift over an inheritance disagreement. Later that evening, as I was finally forcing myself to address the backlog of work emails, my doorbell rang. Standing in the hallway was Martin Henderson, my parents' attorney for as long as I could remember. In his 70s now, Mr. Henderson had handled everything from their home purchase to my father's retirement paperwork. "Samantha," he said formally when I opened the door. "May I come in? There's a matter I need to discuss with you." I led him to my living room, anxiety mounting with each step. Had my parents sent their lawyer to formally communicate their disownment? Was I about to be served with some kind of legal notice? Mr. Henderson declined my offer of coffee, getting straight to business. "I understand there's been some family discord regarding your parents' estate planning." "That's putting it mildly," I replied. "They've cut off all contact with me." He frowned, creases deepening in his weathered face. "That's surprising and concerning, given the circumstances." "What circumstances?" Mr. Henderson hesitated, clearly weighing professional obligations against personal concerns. "I can't discuss specific details of your parents' legal affairs without their consent. However, as someone who has known your family for decades, I'm troubled by recent developments, particularly the timing of certain requests." "What requests?" I leaned forward, every sense alert. "Let's just say there have been unusual activities regarding your parents' accounts. Significant withdrawals, property transfers, and changes to long-standing legal arrangements, all within a very compressed time frame." He studied me carefully. "Have you noticed any changes in your parents' behavior lately, beyond this uncharacteristic estrangement?" The question sent a wave of shame through me. I'd been so consumed with my own hurt that I hadn't considered whether something else might be happening with my parents. "I haven't seen them in over a week," I admitted. "But their neighbor mentioned they seem different, neglecting the yard, missing regular activities." Mr. Henderson nodded slowly. "I see. And your brother? What role is he playing in this situation?" "He's the one receiving everything in the will now. And apparently, he suggested the arrangement to them." The pieces were starting to form a troubling pattern in my mind. "Mr. Henderson, what exactly are you concerned about?" The elderly lawyer stood, straightening his tie in a gesture of professional composure. "I'm not at liberty to speculate, but as someone with a fiduciary duty to your parents, I would appreciate being kept informed if you observe anything unusual in their circumstances or decision-making." As he moved toward the door, he paused. Samantha, I've known you since you were a little girl bringing your piggy bank to my office to discuss saving strategies. You've always been exceptionally prudent and level-headed. It strikes me as out of character for William and Margaret to sever ties with you so abruptly. Perhaps there's more to this situation than is immediately apparent. After he left, I sat motionless, his carefully worded concerns echoing in my mind. Something wasn't adding up. The will changes, the property transfer, the sudden estrangement, Ryan's increased presence, unusual financial activities. What if this wasn't simply about family favoritism? Just as this new perspective was forming, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It contained a screenshot of a social media post from my cousin Elaine. Family drama getting toxic. Can't believe Sam threatened her parents and brother over money. Some people show their true colors when inheritance is involved. This fifth betrayal, Ryan actively spreading lies about me threatening our family, was the final blow in an already devastating week. I hadn't threatened anyone. I'd raised concerns about fairness in a family discussion that had escalated into an argument. Now I was being painted as some kind of violent extortionist. That night, sitting on my balcony in the November chill, I reached my lowest point. The family I thought I knew was gone either turned against me through manipulation or perhaps never truly as I'd perceived them. My professional reputation risked damage from these spreading rumors. My identity as the reliable, successful daughter had been revealed as a role I'd played to earn conditional love that could be withdrawn in an instant. Everything I'd believed about my life felt suddenly hollow. In that moment of utter desolation, staring at the city lights that seemed to mock my isolation, I wondered if anything I'd built for myself had genuine meaning without the family foundation I'd thought was unshakable. The morning after my rock-bottom moment on the balcony, I awoke to an unexpected phone call. The display showed Beverly Williams, my godmother and my mother's college roommate, who lived in Seattle and whom I hadn't spoken with in at least 2 years. Beverly? I answered, voice still rough with sleep and lingering despair. Samantha, thank goodness. I've been trying to reach you for days. Beverly's crisp, no-nonsense tone was instantly familiar despite our infrequent contact. What in the world is happening with your family? I got the strangest call from Margaret yesterday. I sat up in bed, fully alert now. You spoke to my mom? What did she say? That's just it, it was bizarre. She called to tell me we shouldn't be in contact with you anymore because you'd become unstable and threatening, said Ryan was handling their affairs now and all communication should go through him. It didn't sound like Margaret at all. Relief flooded through me at finding someone else who found the situation suspicious. Beverly, I've been completely cut off. Mom sent me a text saying, "It's over between us after one argument about their will. They've blocked my calls, emails, everything. Over a will discussion? That's absurd." Beverly's indignation was palpable even through the phone. I've known your mother for 40 years. She can hold a grudge, but she's never been this extreme. Something else is going on. I gave Beverly a complete account of the events: the dinner revelation, Ryan's admission about suggesting the will change, the argument with my parents, and the devastating text that followed. As I spoke, connections I hadn't fully processed began crystallizing. The timing is suspicious, I concluded. Within days of them telling me about changing the will, they completely cut contact. And according to their lawyer and neighbor, Ryan's been unusually present, and there's been strange activity with their finances. This reminds me of what happened with my sister Judith, Beverly said after a thoughtful pause. Her son manipulated her into changing her will, isolating her from the rest of the family. Classic case of undue influence. We only recognized what was happening after he'd drained half her accounts. You think Ryan is manipulating them? The suggestions simultaneously horrified me and made perfect sense. But why would they be so susceptible? My parents have always been sharp, independent people. People change, Sam, especially as they age. Has either of them shown any cognitive changes lately? Memory issues? Confusion? Personality shifts? I thought back to recent interactions. Mom repeated the same story twice during our last dinner. Dad got lost driving to a restaurant they've been going to for years. I didn't think much of it at the time. Those could be normal aging moments, or they could be early signs of cognitive decline, Beverly said carefully, which makes them particularly vulnerable to manipulation, especially from someone they implicitly trust, like their son. But Ryan wouldn't. I started automatically, then stopped. Would he? The brother who had suggested my disinheritance, who was now apparently spreading lies about me threatening the family, who had already secretly acquired the vacation property, was there a line he wouldn't cross? Samantha, listen to me, Beverly continued, her tone gentling. What you're describing fits a disturbing pattern I've seen before. In family systems psychology, there's often a dynamic between what's called the golden child and the scapegoat. The golden child can do no wrong and receives disproportionate family resources and support, while the scapegoat bears the blame for family problems and is held to impossible standards. That sounds exactly like Ryan and me, I whispered, memories flooding back of 1,000 small moments where different standards were applied. It's a dysfunctional dynamic, but families normalize it. The problem comes when the golden child realizes they can exploit this position, especially if parents begin showing signs of cognitive vulnerability. Beverly's analysis hit me like a revelation. I'd always seen our family roles as just personality differences, but reframing them as a systematic dynamic helped explain the extreme reaction to my questioning the status quo. By challenging the will decision, I disrupted the established family system where Ryan received and I provided. What can I do? I asked, feeling for the first time in days like I might have a path forward. They won't even speak to me. First, you need to consider the possibility that your parents may be experiencing cognitive decline and are being influenced by Ryan. Second, you need allies who can help you piece together what's really happening. I think my parents' lawyer suspects something, I offered. He visited me yesterday asking oblique questions about unusual financial activities. Good. He may be limited by client confidentiality, but he's clearly concerned. Who else might have relevant information or influence? We spent the next hour developing a strategy, identifying potential sources of information and support. Beverly suggested I contact Dr. Michaels, a family therapist she knew in Chicago who specialized in elder issues and family estrangement. This isn't just about inheritance anymore, Sam, Beverly concluded. If I'm right, this could be about protecting your parents from exploitation. And that means you need to approach this differently, not as their daughter fighting for fair treatment, but as their advocate ensuring their well-being and autonomy. After we hung up, I felt something I hadn't experienced in days: purpose. Beverly's perspective had shifted my understanding of the situation entirely. What if this wasn't about my parents rejecting me, but about them being influenced while in a vulnerable state? What if Ryan's golden child status had evolved from family favoritism into something more predatory? I scheduled an appointment with Dr. Michaels for the following day, then began organizing everything I knew about my parents' financial and legal arrangements. As a financial advisor, I had the professional knowledge to recognize red flags in their financial activities if I could access the information. Dr. Michaels turned out to be a compassionate but direct woman in her 50s who listened carefully to my account without judgment. When I finished, she nodded thoughtfully. The family dynamics you're describing are unfortunately common, she explained. The golden child divided by scapegoat pattern creates a foundation for potential financial exploitation later in life. The favored child feels entitled to family resources, while the scapegoat is easily discredited if they raise concerns. That's exactly what's happening, I said. Everyone immediately believes I'm acting out of jealousy or greed, not legitimate concern. And if your parents are experiencing cognitive changes, they're particularly susceptible to manipulation through emotional triggers. Someone could easily convince them you've done or said terrible things, especially if it aligns with existing family narratives. So what do? I can't force them to speak to me or get evaluated by a doctor. No, but you can gather evidence, build a network of support, and approach the situation from a place of genuine concern rather than personal hurt. She leaned forward, her expression serious. Samantha, I want you to consider something difficult. This isn't about fair treatment anymore. If financial exploitation is occurring, your parents are victims, even if they don't recognize it yet. The reframing was powerful. This wasn't about my hurt feelings or sibling rivalry, it was about potentially protecting my vulnerable parents from harm. That perspective gave me strength and clarity I'd been lacking. In the days that followed, Beverly became my lifeline and sounding board. Despite living across the country, she made herself available for daily check-ins, sharing her own experience with her sister's situation, and helping me navigate the complex emotions of the process. The hardest part for me was accepting that Judith couldn't recognize what was happening, she told me during one late-night call. She'd become so dependent on my nephew's narrative that she saw my concerns as attacks. I had to separate my hurt at her rejection from my determination to protect her. How did you manage that separation? I asked. Therapy helped. So did connecting with others who'd experienced similar situations. There's power in knowing you're not alone, that this pattern happens to many families and isn't a reflection of your worth or your parents' true feelings for you. Beverly had become my first real ally in this confusing new reality, someone who believed my perceptions, validated my concerns, and offered guidance without judgment. Her support gave me the foundation I needed to move from paralyzed victim to strategic advocate. With Beverly's encouragement and Dr. Michael's guidance, I began rebuilding my emotional resilience. I returned to work with a modified schedule, being transparent with my supervisor about facing a family crisis without sharing potentially damaging details. I resumed basic self-care, regular meals, exercise, adequate sleep, recognizing that I needed my strength for the challenge ahead. Most importantly, I stopped seeing my parents' rejection as the end of a relationship and started viewing it as a symptom of a larger problem that required investigation and intervention. This shift from personal devastation to purposeful action marked the beginning of my recovery from the initial shock and grief. Remember, Beverly told me during one of our calls, your parents raised you to be strong, capable, and independent. Those qualities may have complicated your family dynamics, but they're exactly what you need now to help protect them even from themselves. Those words became my mantra as I prepared for the difficult steps ahead. I wasn't just fighting for my place in the family anymore. I was fighting for my parents' well-being and autonomy against forces they might not even recognize were harming them. Armed with new perspective and purpose, I began approaching the situation methodically, drawing on my professional skills as a financial advisor. If Ryan was indeed exploiting our parents, there would be a paper trail of suspicious activities. My challenge was accessing that information without direct contact with my parents. Beverly and I developed a strategy that started with gathering publicly available information: property records, business registrations, tax liens, anything that might reveal unusual financial movements. We created a secure shared document where we could compile findings and identify patterns. Our first discovery was illuminating. Ryan had recently registered a new business entity called Reynolds Family Investments, LLC. As listed in the public filing, the managing members were Ryan and both our parents, with Ryan holding controlling interest. The registration date coincided almost exactly with the timing of our family dinner where the will changes were announced. This is significant, Beverly noted during our evening debrief call. An LLC like this could be legitimate for family estate planning, but the timing and control structure are concerning, especially given your parents' potential cognitive issues. Further research revealed that Ryan's latest business venture, the one he'd been vaguely describing as consulting for months, appeared to be a cryptocurrency investment scheme called Crypto Futures Global. The company's website made grandiose claims about revolutionary blockchain technology but provided suspiciously few specific details about how investments actually generated returns. Classic signs of a potential investment scam, I noted. My financial advisor alarms blaring: vague technical jargon, promises of exceptional returns, urgency to invest before opportunity closes. The most troubling discovery came through an unexpected source. Mrs. Abernathy, my parents' neighbor whom I'd spoken with briefly during my walk past their house, called me one evening. "Samantha, I hope you don't mind me reaching out. I got your number from the church directory," she began. "I'm increasingly concerned about your parents. There have been unusual visitors to the housemen in business suits who look more like salesmen than friends. And yesterday I noticed your mother trying to get the mail without your father's help. She seemed confused about which house was hers." This report of cognitive confusion, combined with suspicious visitors, heightened my alarm. I gently asked Mrs. Abernathy if she'd be willing to keep an informal eye on the house and let me know of any concerning developments. She readily agreed, expressing her own worry about the changes she'd observed. The investigation gained momentum when Mr. Henderson, my parents' attorney, called to request a meeting regarding a professional matter. When we met at a quiet cafe away from my office, his careful professional demeanor had been replaced by evident concern. Samantha, I've been your parents' attorney for 30 years. In that time, I've never seen them make such radical changes to their affairs so quickly. He adjusted his glasses nervously. Last week, I was instructed to transfer the deed of their house into the new family LLC. When I suggested we discuss the tax implications of such a move, your father became uncharacteristically agitated. Your brother, who was present during the call, said they needed it done immediately and would find another attorney if I created obstacles. Did they go through with it? I asked, alarmed. Not yet. I managed to create a legitimate delay by citing necessary property assessments. But I'm walking a fine line between my ethical obligations to my clients and my concerns about potential undue influence. Mr. Henderson couldn't explicitly share confidential client information, but his decision to meet with me spoke volumes. I can tell you that significant sums have been transferred from your parents' retirement accounts recently, all perfectly legal with their signatures, but highly unusual given their previous conservative approach to withdrawals. And all this activity began after Ryan started spending more time at their house? Precisely. He leaned forward. Samantha, I can't advise you directly in this matter due to conflict of interest. But, hypothetically, if I were concerned about a client's decision-making capacity and potential exploitation, I might suggest that a concerned family member consult with an elder law attorney about protective measures. That evening, I shared this development with Beverly, who immediately connected me with a colleague specializing in elder law. The attorney, Maria Gonzalez, outlined potential options ranging from informal intervention to legal guardianship proceedings, with clear cautions about the emotional and relationship impacts of each approach. Before considering any legal intervention, you need substantially more evidence of both cognitive impairment and exploitation, Ms. Gonzalez advised. Medical evaluation would be ideal, but since your parents aren't willingly communicating with you, that's challenging. So I need more concrete evidence, I concluded. Exactly. Bank statements, withdrawal patterns, changes to accounts or properties, medical records if you can access them. Anything that shows a pattern of unusual decision-making and financial activity that deviates from their established habits. The following week became a careful balancing act, maintaining my professional responsibilities while devoting every spare moment to the investigation. Beverly continued research from Seattle, focusing on Ryan's business activities and connections. I worked my network of financial professionals to gather information about potential investments my parents might have been drawn into. A breakthrough came when I received an unexpected email from my father's former colleague, Coach Thompson, who had attended my parents' anniversary party months earlier. Sam, your dad's been acting strange lately. We've had a weekly golf game for 10 years, but he's missed the last 3 weeks. When I called to check on him, your brother said he was resting and taking a break from socializing. This isn't like Bill at all. Golf is practically religion to him. Then yesterday, I saw him at the grocery store. He seemed disoriented and didn't recognize me at first. When he did, he whispered that he wasn't supposed to talk to people without Ryan present. Something's not right. This report of Ryan restricting my father's social interactions was a red flag for potential isolation, a common tactic in elder exploitation cases. I added it to our growing file of concerning behaviors. Simultaneously, I discovered through financial industry channels that several substantial withdrawals had been made from my parents' primary investment account, money they had consistently described as their untouchable retirement foundation. These funds had apparently been transferred to a new investment entity connected to Ryan's cryptocurrency venture. As the evidence mounted, Beverly and I worked with Ms. Playson Gonzalez to organize it into categories: potential cognitive decline indicators, financial irregularities, isolation tactics, and timeline of events. The pattern that emerged was increasingly troubling. It appeared Ryan was systematically consolidating control over our parents' assets while limiting their contact with outside perspectives that might question his actions. Mr. Henderson provided another critical piece of information when he called to tell me that my parents had abruptly terminated his services after 30 years, transferring their legal matters to a new attorney recommended by Ryan. I received a letter instructing me to transfer all documents to Griffin Law Group, a firm I'm not familiar with. When I called to confirm this dramatic change, your brother answered your father's phone and said the decision was final. The most disturbing discovery came through Mrs. Abernathy, who reported seeing my mother sitting alone on the porch one afternoon, apparently confused and distressed. I asked if she was all right, and she said she couldn't find her medication. She mentioned something about Ryan reorganizing their pills to make it simpler, but said the new system was confusing her. When I offered to help, she became anxious, saying Ryan would be upset if she discussed family matters with neighbors. The mention of medication raised immediate concerns about potential medical neglect or manipulation. If Ryan was indeed reorganizing their medications without proper medical oversight, he could be jeopardizing their health as well as their finances. By the end of 2 weeks of investigation, the assembled evidence painted a deeply concerning picture. Ryan appeared to be 1. Consolidating legal control over family assets through the LLC. 2. Directing substantial funds into his questionable investment scheme. 3. Isolating our parents from longtime friends and advisors. 4. Potentially interfering with their medical care. 5. Creating a narrative of family conflict to justify cutting me out completely. When I presented the complete file to Miss Gonzalez, her expression was grave. You've compiled significant circumstantial evidence suggesting both diminished capacity and exploitation. The next step is determining the appropriate intervention. What are my options? I asked. Given the severity of the situation, I recommend starting with an Adult Protective Services report to trigger an official investigation. Simultaneously, we can prepare a petition for guardianship evaluation, though that's a more nuclear option that would fundamentally change your relationship with your parents. The prospect of taking such dramatic legal steps against my own family was heartbreaking, but the alternative, allowing potential exploitation to continue unchecked, was unthinkable. With Beverly's steady support and Dr. Michael's helping me process the emotional complexity, I made the difficult decision to move forward with formal intervention. Remember, Beverly reminded me gently, this isn't about the inheritance anymore. It's about protecting your parents from harm they may not even recognize is occurring. Sometimes love means making the hardest choices. As I prepared to take this momentous step, I felt a complex mixture of determination, grief, and a strange sense of clarity. The path ahead would be difficult, potentially destroying any chance of reconciliation if my concerns proved unfounded. But the evidence suggested my parents were in genuine danger, and their well-being had to take precedence over my fear of permanent estrangement. The financial advisor in me had assembled the facts. Now the daughter in me had to act on them regardless of the personal cost. The Adult Protective Services report set events in motion faster than I anticipated. Within 48 hours, a caseworker had conducted an initial welfare check at my parents' home. Though I wasn't privy to the details of their assessment, I received a brief call informing me they had found sufficient cause for concern to proceed with a more thorough investigation. Beverly flew in from Seattle to provide in-person support as we prepared for whatever might come next. Her presence in my condo brought a sense of family solidarity. I desperately needed someone who knew my parents, understood family dynamics, and believed in my concerns without question. We need to be prepared for direct confrontation with Ryan, Beverly advised as we finalized our approach. Once he realizes official agencies are involved, he'll likely escalate his defensive tactics. She was right. The morning after the APS visit, I received a scathing email from Ryan. How dare you send government agents to harass our elderly parents? This proves exactly what I've told them. You're vindictive and unstable, willing to put them through a traumatic investigation because you're jealous of their relationship with me. Stay away from our family or face legal consequences. The threatening tone only reinforced my concerns. Rather than expressing worry about our parents' welfare or questioning why such an investigation might be happening, Ryan's immediate response was anger and further attempts to isolate them. With Miss Gonzalez's guidance, we arranged a meeting with Ryan at a neutral location, a conference room at her law office. The formal setting was intentional, establishing from the outset that this was a serious legal matter, not a sibling squabble. Ryan arrived 15 minutes late, his typically charismatic demeanor replaced by defensive hostility. He brought his own attorney, a young man who appeared uncomfortable and kept checking his watch. "Let's make this quick," Ryan announced without preamble. "Your harassment needs to stop." Miss Gonzalez took control of the meeting immediately. "Mr. Reynolds, we've requested this meeting to address serious concerns about your parents' welfare and financial security. We have documented evidence of unusual financial transactions, isolation from longtime advisors and friends, and potential medical neglect. She methodically presented our findings: the LLC formation, the substantial withdrawals, the investment in his cryptocurrency venture, the dismissal of their longtime attorney, reports of confusion and restricted social contact. With each point, Ryan's expression shifted between anger and something less definable, perhaps worry. "This is ridiculous," he interjected. "They're making financial decisions they're completely entitled to make. Just because Sam doesn't like their choices doesn't make them exploitative." "What about Mom's medication being reorganized?" I asked directly. "Or Dad being told not to speak to friends without you present? Or Mom not recognizing which house is hers? They're getting older. They need help with medications and get confused sometimes. That's why I'm there supporting them, unlike you, who only calls when you want something." "When was their last cognitive assessment?" Miss Gonzalez inquired. "Given these reported episodes of confusion, surely their doctor has been consulted?" Ryan's attorney shifted uncomfortably at this question. After a whispered conversation with Ryan, he addressed the room. "My client has been acting in good faith to support his parents during a challenging time. If mistakes have been made in their care management, they were unintentional and can be addressed constructively." This subtle shift from denial to acknowledgement of mistakes was telling. Miss Gonzalez pressed the advantage. "We're prepared to petition the court for a formal cognitive and capacity evaluation if necessary. Alternatively, we could arrange for an independent geriatric assessment in a less adversarial context with all family members present." The mention of court involvement visibly rattled Ryan. After another whispered consultation, his attorney proposed a brief recess. When they returned 20 minutes later, Ryan's demeanor had changed dramatically. "Look," he began, suddenly sounding exhausted rather than combative, "things got complicated. Mom's been having memory issues for months. Dad's trying to cover for her while dealing with his own health problems. I was just trying to help organize their finances before they made serious mistakes. By transferring their assets to an LLC you control and investing their retirement in your cryptocurrency business?" I asked incredulously. Ryan stared at his hands. "Crypto futures isn't doing well. I needed capital to keep it afloat. I convinced them it was a sure thing. I was going to pay them back with interest when it recovered." The admission hung in the air, not a full confession of exploitation, but an acknowledgement of serious conflict of interest and questionable financial management. "And the will changes? The story that I threatened you? Cutting me off completely?" I pressed, needing to understand the full scope of his manipulation. "That was. I needed them to trust only me. When you questioned the will, it threatened my access, so I—" He trailed off, unable to verbalize the extent of his deception. Miss Gonzalez stepped in with clinical precision. "Mr. Reynolds, it appears you've knowingly misrepresented your sister's actions to your potentially cognitively impaired parents, isolated them from proper medical care and independent advisors, and directed their assets into your failing business venture. These actions potentially constitute elder abuse and financial exploitation, serious legal matters." Ryan's attorney placed a restraining hand on his arm before he could respond. "My client acknowledges some errors in judgment but was acting from a place of family concern. We're willing to discuss appropriate remediation steps." The meeting concluded with an agreement. Ryan would arrange for our parents to receive complete cognitive and physical health assessments with an independent geriatric specialist. All financial transfers would cease immediately, and an independent financial conservator would be appointed temporarily to review recent transactions and protect remaining assets. Most importantly, I would be permitted to see our parents with neutral supervision present. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in the living room of my childhood home, heart pounding as I waited for my parents to join me. Beverly sat beside me for moral support, while a social worker from Elder Services observed unobtrusively from the corner. When my mother entered the room, I barely recognized her. In just weeks, she seemed to have aged years, her hair unkempt, her typically immaculate clothing replaced by a mismatched outfit. The vacant confusion in her eyes confirmed my worst fears. "Who is visiting today?" she asked my father, who guided her gently to the sofa. "It's Samantha, dear." "Our daughter," he replied, his voice tinged with a sadness that broke my heart. Unlike my mother, my father showed no obvious cognitive impairment, just exhaustion and defeat. "Samantha is angry with us," my mother stated flatly, clearly repeating something she'd been told. "She doesn't love us anymore." "That's not true, Mom," I said gently, fighting back tears. "I've been trying to reach you for weeks. I was worried about you." My father met my eyes for the first time. "Ryan said you threatened legal action against us if we didn't change the will back. He said you called us terrible parents and wanted nothing more to do with us." "Dad, I never said any of those things. We had one argument about the will, that's all. Everything else, the threats, the estrangement, that all came from Ryan." My father's expression shifted from confusion to dawning realization. "But the text message, Ryan showed us a text you supposedly sent, saying horrible things." "I never sent any such text," I replied, the pieces finally clicking into place. "Just like I'm guessing you never sent me a text saying, 'It's over between us.'" The social worker intervened at this point, gently guiding the conversation toward practical matters of my parents' current health and care needs. As we talked, it became increasingly clear that my mother was experiencing significant memory and cognitive issues that had been deliberately hidden rather than addressed. My father, though cognitively intact, had been manipulated through his concern for my mother and loyalty to Ryan. The subsequent medical evaluation confirmed what was now obvious. My mother had moderate dementia that had gone undiagnosed and untreated for months. While my father was suffering from depression and extreme caregiver stress, Ryan had exploited their vulnerability, isolating them from proper medical care while systematically gaining control of their finances. The elder care specialist, Dr. Powell, became our third crucial ally, developing a comprehensive care plan that addressed both my mother's cognitive needs and my father's emotional well-being. With professional guidance, we began the delicate process of reestablishing trust and communication after the profound breach Ryan had engineered. As for Ryan himself, the full accounting of his actions revealed a more desperate situation than even I had imagined. His cryptocurrency business had been failing catastrophically, with investor complaints and potential regulatory violations already in motion before he began targeting our parents' assets. The financial conservator discovered he had transferred over $300,000 of their money into his business or personal accounts within a 6-week period. When confronted with the complete evidence, Ryan broke down, admitting he had fabricated conversations, intercepted phone calls and messages, and deliberately isolated our parents to maintain his control. His actions had crossed from familial favoritism into criminal territory, leaving the family with painful decisions about pursuing legal consequences. The truth had finally emerged, but it brought little vindication, only sadness for the suffering my parents had endured and the family bonds that had been damaged, perhaps irreparably. Yet within this painful reality, there was also the beginning of healing and protection for my vulnerable parents. 6 months after the confrontation with Ryan and the discovery of my mother's dementia, our family had established a new equilibrium, not the comfortable familiarity of the past, but a more transparent and protected arrangement that prioritized my parents' well-being. My mother's condition had stabilized with proper medical care and medication, though her memory issues remained significant. Some days she recognized me instantly. Other days I was a vaguely familiar visitor she couldn't quite place. The pain of those moments never diminished, but I'd learned to meet her where she was, treasuring the good days and practicing patience on the difficult ones. My father had emerged from his fog of depression with the help of therapy and relief from the overwhelming burden of caregiving alone. With support services now in place and transparent medical guidance, he'd regained much of his former vigor and clarity. Our relationship had healed gradually as he processed the full extent of Ryan's manipulation and his own unwitting role in it. "I should have seen it," he told me during one of our regular coffee meetings. "Looking back, the signs were so obvious, but I was so focused on protecting your mother that I couldn't see how Ryan was isolating us." "You can't blame yourself, Dad," I assured him. "Ryan exploited your love and concern. That's on him, not you." The legal aftermath had been complicated and painful. With the evidence compiled by the financial conservator, Ryan faced potential criminal charges for elder financial exploitation. After much soul-searching and family discussion, my parents decided against pressing criminal charges, instead opting for a structured restitution agreement with strict oversight. Ryan's legal consequences were mitigated, but the emotional and relational damage was profound. He'd moved to another state, beginning the long process of making financial amends while having only limited, supervised contact with our parents. Whether genuine reconciliation would ever be possible remained an open question that only time would answer. The family's financial matters had been completely restructured under the guidance of independent advisors. A proper estate plan was established with appropriate legal protections, reflecting my parents' true wishes, a balanced approach that acknowledged both children's place in the family while incorporating necessary safeguards given Ignatius's, my mother's cognitive vulnerability. The vacation property that had been secretly transferred to Ryan was returned to my parents' estate. My father and I spent several weekends that summer restoring the cottage that held so many family memories, finding healing in the physical work of rebuilding something broken. Beverly had remained an unwavering presence throughout the process, offering wisdom from her own experience and providing my father with crucial perspective as he navigated his new role as a husband to someone with dementia. The hardest part is mourning the future you thought you would have while still appreciating the present you actually have, she told him during a particularly difficult week. Margaret is still here, just different. Your relationship can still have meaning and joy, just in new ways. Dr. Michaels, the family therapist who had helped me understand the golden child divided by scapegoat dynamic, now worked with both my father and me to establish healthier communication patterns and boundaries. Her insights helped us recognize how long-established family roles had created vulnerabilities that Ryan exploited. Family systems resist change, she explained during a joint session. When Samantha questioned the will decision, she was really questioning the underlying family dynamic where Ryan receives and Samantha provides. That triggered a system-wide defensive reaction that Ryan manipulated to his advantage. Thanksgiving arrived, marking the traditional beginning of the holiday season that had always centered around family gatherings. This year, instead of the strained performance of perfect family harmony that had characterized previous celebrations, we opted for authenticity over appearance. Beverly joined us, along with a few close friends who had supported us through the crisis. My mother had one of her better days, recognizing everyone and even helping arrange her prized holiday table decorations. My father, looking more rested than he had in years, carved the turkey with his characteristic precision. As we sat together around the table smaller than in previous years but somehow more genuine, my father raised his glass for a toast. To truth and healing, he said simply. And to Samantha, who had the courage to fight for us even when we couldn't see we needed fighting for. My mother, in a moment of clarity, reached for my hand. I'm sorry about the text, she said, referring to the message Ryan had sent pretending to be her the message that had caused so much pain. I would never say goodbye to you. I know, Mom, I assured her, throat tight with emotion. I know. Later that evening, as guests departed and my parents retired to bed, I sat with Beverly on the back porch, watching stars appear in the clear November sky. The house behind us, once the site of so much hidden pain and manipulation, felt cleansed, somehow not perfect, but honest in its imperfection. You know, Beverly said thoughtfully, that text message that supposedly ended your relationship with your parents, it was actually the beginning of saving them. The observation struck me with its truth. The devastating words that had shattered my world had ultimately led to uncovering the exploitation that might otherwise have continued unchecked until nothing remained of my parents' security and dignity. I never imagined this is where we'd end up, I admitted. When I got that text, I thought I'd lost everything. Now I realize I was just seeing my family clearly for the first time. And that clarity is allowing you to build something healthier, Beverly added. Not perfect, not what you expected, but real. In the months of healing and rebuilding, I had learned profound lessons about family dynamics, unconditional love, and the difference between enabling and supporting. I had discovered that sometimes protecting those you love means standing against their expressed wishes when those wishes come from manipulation or cognitive impairment. Most importantly, I had learned that family bonds, when authentic, can survive even the most painful truths and transformations. The text that had declared, "It's over between us," had been a lie, one of many designed to isolate and control. The truth was more complicated, more painful, but ultimately more hopeful. Nothing was over. We were simply beginning a new chapter, eyes wide open to both the limitations and the possibilities of family love. Have you ever experienced a moment when what seemed like an ending turned out to be a beginning? Have you had to stand up against family pressure to protect someone you love? Share your experiences in the comments below. Your story might help someone else navigate their own family challenges. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share it with someone who might need to hear that family healing is possible, even after profound betrayal. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes protecting those we love requires the courage to see difficult truths